Jimmy Butler celebrates his 33rd birthday, and this season feels like a pivotal point in his career as he continues to prove his worth as one of the top players in the NBA. What are the expectations for Jimmy Butler's upcoming season? Can he carry the Heat to yet another deep playoff run, or will he need someone else to step up? We break it all down on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Heat Nation, it's a Wednesday edition of Locked On Heat, your daily podcast covering all things Miami Heat. However, you may be listening or watching on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app. Thanks so much for making us your first listen every day. I'm David Ramil, and with me, as always, is my co-host Wes Goldberg. We took a little bit of a slight hiatus there over the last couple of days as I've been nursing a cold, but now we're back and we're ready to talk about Jimmy Butler, who's turning 33 today. So we thought it was a good opportunity to take a look at Miami superstar, to what this upcoming season could look like for him and what happens next, because there are questions about how much longer Jimmy will be able to carry the team the way he has during the first 3 seasons of his Heat tenure. So let's start off with that kind of talking point there, because obviously turning 33, there are some historical comparisons to what that point might look like. A few years ago, 33 would have been very much towards the tail end of his career. But Jimmy seems like he's going quite strong. It looks like he's fairly ensconced in the midst of his prime rather than looking at retirement or whatever might happen next. There's another 4 years left on his contract after signing his 3-year contract extension a couple off seasons ago. So he's still going strong, obviously carrying Miami through the deep playoff run last season, all the way up to the Game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals. So what does this season look like for Jimmy? What do you think, Wes? At age 33, will that finally start to catch up with him?
To that, is no. I don't think that this is the season where we start to see age become a factor. Now, obviously, at some point, age will become a factor. But like you just said, it's not like what it used to be. I mean, you look at LeBron, and that's obviously the exception to the rule, but he's the Tom Brady of the NBA, right? This is a guy who's probably going to play until he's 45 years old, to play not with just one, his Bryce or Bronny, but he also wants to play with his youngest son, Bryce, according to Chris Ballard from that wonderful Sports Illustrated profile that he wrote recently. And you could just see the way that the science and all of this stuff is involved, how it's just elongating these careers of these top players. And the one thing about Jimmy Butler is, no, he's not the most naturally gifted, skilled kind of player, but physically he is top 1% in the league, right? Like, this is a guy who takes care of his body, works really hard on it, and is physically gifted. The endurance that he has. I mean, you could argue he is, I don't know about the best two-way player in the NBA, but gives his hardest more than any other player in the league on both ends of the court. And that's because of that great body. It's because of that great endurance, and we haven't seen it slowed. We obviously saw, the maximum version of that in the postseason last year. So, again, the answer to me right now is no, based on what we just saw coming off that playoff run. There's no indications. He's been relatively healthy, right? Nagging injuries here and there. Relatively healthy, though. No major ones, knock on wood. And I expect that as long as that's the case, I expect him to play as well as he did last year.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I think the question about whether or not he's in his prime is pretty clear. Like, he's playing as well as he ever has, perhaps even better, more effectively. And then we see him still capable, even at 33 or 32 and a half, as he was during last year's playoff run, of taking it to another level, going up yet another notch, finding ways to continue to dominate games that most 33-year-olds can't. So I don't think age has caught up to him yet. From what we've seen over the offseason, he's continuing to do the work. We expected nothing less from Jimmy Butler. So he seems like he's still committed at this point and looking to continue to find ways to improve. And I think that's something that we'll explore later on in the show. But to answer the overall question, yes, I am total agreement with you. I don't think age is quite what it was, and at least certainly not in his case. Like, we've seen even younger players break down to some degree because of various injuries. Jimmy has been, as you said, very lucky. So I don't think it's caught up to him just yet, and I don't see him slowing down this season. And next season, that's a whole other conversation.
Part of it, too, is just the way stars handle the regular season now. I mean, Jimmy Butler has not played 60 games in a season for 4 years now, and that's not a knock on his health or anything. That's just what stars of his caliber do now. You basically, in an 82-game season, you take 20 games off, and that's just common. That's what players of his caliber do, and so that's also helped things a little bit. You look at the key indicators of age, right, for NBA players, and typically what you'll look at first is rebounding, and then some of those hustle stats like steals, blocks, depending on the position, right? But
Right.
but for Jimmy Butler, yes, his rebounding has gone down from 2 years ago to last year. There was a dip in rebounding, a slight dip in blocks and steals, but if you look over the overall average of his career, they're right in line with what Jimmy has done through the prime years of his career, basically 6 and like a steal and a half and almost a block per game.
Yeah.
So that to me tells me last year that was maybe more the dip in rebounding and stuff like that, maybe more of a factor of his usage, the way that Miami's using him, the fact that you had a good rebounder in PJ Tucker, that you had Jimmy playing away from the basket a little bit more, that you obviously had Kyle Lowry handling the ball a little bit more. That to me is more of a function of how they used him as opposed to just maybe not having the legs under him and the way that he had used to. So the indicators show that Jimmy Butler really isn't slowing down at all. I've got a bunch of stats that I want to get to on later in the show, but to your point too, I mean, like the minutes played here, I've got the list. Let me pull it up. Like you look at how many minutes Jimmy has played in the regular season and in the playoffs combined, and you can find this on Basketball Reference, and I've got the list right in front of me. You look at who he's near, and it's a bunch of players who are also kind of in their prime, I think squarely in their prime, but clearly on the tail end of it. And whether that means 2 or 3 more years of their prime, they're still in it. Right around him is Klay Thompson, who did have 2 years off because of the injuries that he was dealing with. But Damian Lillard, Paul George, right? Like let's just take Dame and Paul George for example. Nobody is saying that those guys are slowing down, right? That's not really a question that maybe Clippers and Portland fans are having it, and I'm just not privy to it. But it's not really a conversation that's out there. And for Jimmy Butler, I don't think it should be there too. To me, a guy who is squarely in his prime, tail end of it, sure, second half of the prime, but in the prime.
No, I think that's fair. I mean, and you consider Clay, and you look at all the what
True.
7 trips to
Yeah.
the finals.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's bound to add up. Jimmy, not nearly as successful in the playoffs earlier in his career with Chicago, and then finally making a playoffs with Minnesota, Philadelphia, and then going to the finals twice. Well, going to the finals once with Miami, and going all the way to Game 7 in the Eastern Conference Finals. So he's had some playoff success in Miami, but I don't think the minutes have started to add up yet. And for all the talk too about Tom Thibodeau wearing on his players and kind of grinding them into the ground and things of that sort, I don't think we're starting to see that with Jimmy. Yeah. Like Jimmy's starting to play significantly less minutes, at least during the regular season, more towards the career average for him, which is around 33 minutes. And I've got a comparison here that I think makes a lot of sense for Heat fans. This is Jimmy Butler entering this season is comparable to Dwayne Wade entering the 2014-15 season. So right after the end of the Big Three era. And if you recall correctly, the 13-14 season was when Dwayne entered his maintenance program. A concern for LeBron James is Dwayne no longer the player he once was, no longer able to get that same kind of bounce and athleticism that he once had. Of course, with Dwayne, there was also something that Jimmy didn't have or doesn't have, which is the nagging knee injury that has affected him that affected Dwayne throughout all of his career. So Jimmy's been much more fortunate in that sense. Dwayne's knee, obviously a concern in 13-14. He got the rest, still effective for the most part in the playoffs. And then for the next few seasons, wound up being pretty successful. But up to that 13-14 season, Dwayne played 719 regular season games compared to just 690 for Jimmy Butler. And then in the playoffs, 157 total games as opposed to 97. So basically the equivalent of a whole extra season that Dwayne had played up to that point, more than Jimmy. Considering the playoff runs in 2006 and then the 4 trips to the finals with the Big Three era, those games all add up, obviously. And then again, Dwayne with that nagging knee injury, I think, starting to take out of him, take something away from his game to some degree that we haven't seen with Jimmy. And I'd say styles of game, and we'll get into this a little bit more later on in the show as well, I think benefit Jimmy. Jimmy not as prone to diving to the ground, not as prone as just, not necessarily flopping, but just different attacks.
Jimmy is a little bit slower, more methodical. He'll go into a post up to a hook, where Dwayne Wade for so much of his career, and that was basically been Jimmy's game for his whole career.
Yeah.
Dwayne Wade early in his career, we know, like played just with like his head was on fire, just going right to the basket. We just did our 2006 finals rewatch. It was like every time D Wade took a shot, even like a fadeaway, he would end up on his butt somehow. And it was, it's a good comparison. Also with Jimmy, he's staying young, right? Like this is a guy who is traveling during the offseason a whole lot. He's obviously still working on his game. He seems to be in great shape.
Getting his hair done. I
He's,
mean,
he's got the
he's
extensions.
living life. Yeah.
He's drinking what it sounds like 17 cups of coffee a day. I mean, you know what? He's got a system. So far, it's working. Do you think the extensions make an appearance in the regular season?
I can't see as they would.
Do you
Have
hope they do? Let's put it that way.
No.
Preseason. Give me preseason just to see it. Give me preseason. But I would be shocked because you and I are going to be there on media day. I would be shocked if he's at media day and he's got the extensions, but we'll see.
See, I'd love that because that's like every picture. Like you'll see that version
Right.
of Jimmy when he's wishing all of us a Merry Christmas, a Mother's Day. Like we'll
Yeah.
see him throughout the whole year in a dreadlocked version of Jimmy.
Yeah.
And then
He
of
does
course, we'll see a
typically
very
pick
different version.
one hairstyle for the full season, right? He went with the cornrows last year, with the braids last year, and he had that at media day, right? And that was sort of like what you saw during Halloween and Christmas and all the sort of things that they do. So I'll be interested to see. We'll find out.
Yeah. It's a good question, but one question that I think a lot of Heat fans have is, will he continue to carry the Miami Heat as he did this past season? We'll answer that in the next segment. But before we do that, just a reminder that betonline.net is your #1 source for all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports info this season. You can find all the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. The Dolphins, they actually managed to win
Yeah, baby.
despite the online criticism of Tua. I cannot even pronounce his last name. I'm a lapsed Dolphins fan.
Tua's the man.
There you go.
We're good.
Yeah. Okay. BetOnline is also your continued source for all your sporting wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check on all your favorite sports and events. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends in action. BetOnline, where the game starts. Steph Curry, Kevin Durant, LeBron James, Giannis Antetokounmpo. Which NBA player moves the betting line the most this season? Locked On and the BetOnline odds makers present the NBA top 50 most valuable players starting next Monday, September 19th. You can find it on Locked On NBA wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. That list, a very interesting one. I'm sure Heat fans will find it as interesting as well. We'll be sure to talk about it in an episode next week, especially where Jimmy Butler ranks as one of the most valuable players in the NBA. So make sure you stay tuned for that. But right now, we're looking ahead to what next season could look like, and specifically the question about whether or not he can carry Miami. Because I think in terms of the regular season, obviously he was battling some nagging injuries here and there. We expect that to be the case between his ankle and his wrists, and just the fact that he does take a beating from time to time. He's going to miss some games, but overall, it seems like there's another level that we see Jimmy reach during the playoffs, and one that he doesn't and shouldn't take on during the regular season. That 82 game stretch, not necessary for Jimmy to be on point all the time. As much as Heat fans would love that, and I'm sure there are probably some old heads saying, "Oh, well, Michael Jordan never took a day off." Guess what? That's a total lie. Michael Jordan did take days off on occasion,
and
he
used to
did
go
not
golfing,
play.
and he used to go to Vegas. Yeah.
So it's different. Like he never wanted to lose, and he had very good teams, and he didn't lose a whole heck of a lot. But at the same time, let's not make that comparison. Jimmy's entitled to some time off.
I don't think
He's
anybody's making that comparison, by the way, Jimmy Butler to Michael Jordan. But
no, not
to your
necessarily
point.
on times of play. But yeah, but it's just like, like, do you have to like demolish the Sacramento Kings in a mid-February game? Like,
No, I mean, like,
is
look,
that really important?
No, it's not. And Jimmy Butler has found out, like LeBron James has, and several of the star players in this league, how to just maintain through the regular season. Like I just said, all these guys are playing
Post
60
a little
games.
bit.
Everybody wants the regular season to get cut. For the star players, the regular season has been cut, right? Like, there are not star players, very few of them, I should say, that are playing 80, 82 games in a season. They're playing 60 to 70 games in a season. They're all taking 15 to 22 games off. Jimmy Butler is one of them. And that's fine. That's fine. I expect that to be the case this regular season. And then that way, when the playoffs will roll around, you see playoff Jimmy Butler coming back. But in terms of whether or not he can carry the Heat, to answer your question, David, that's two different questions. Can he carry the Heat through the regular season because he is their best player, and you're going to have to rely on him when he is on the court for those 60 games that he's going to play? And then can he obviously do what he did in the playoffs last year? In terms of both, I think the answer still is yes right now. I admit, going into last postseason, I was dubious about Miami's chances. I said, look, Jimmy Butler is a fantastic player, but he is not the guy that can carry you. He can't be the best guy on a championship winning team. David, what I saw, I know that the Heat obviously didn't even make it to the finals, but what I saw in the playoffs, what Jimmy Butler did on an injured, limping Miami Heat team, I changed my mind. I'm completely proven wrong, and I'm happy to be proven wrong. He is good enough to be the best player on a championship team. I am convinced of that if he could play the way that he did last year, and I think he will. If you just look at his numbers too, by the way, like, it's not that he necessarily played better in the playoffs. He did, but I think it's not that he got more efficient or played necessarily different all that much. I think he just did more in the playoffs, if you know what I mean. Like, you look at his regular season to playoff metrics, and it's just the efficiency numbers are consistent from the regular season to the playoffs. It's just that the usage, the frequency with which he posted up or got to the basket or shot threes or all that kind of stuff, all of that just went up in the playoffs. But the efficiency, for the most part, outside of the 3-point shooting, was basically the same. When we have that conversation about what it looks like for a player to carry a team, I think in today's NBA, the idea of that player is what? It's a wing player who can do a lot, a two-way wing, and on offense, that wing can handle the ball, get guys involved, but also take over, whether it's at the basket, from the mid-range, and all these things. And you just go down like what Jimmy Butler does well, and he does all the things that you sort of want your apex predator wing to do in today's NBA. I think Jimmy Butler is right there with, the Kawhis and the Paul Georges. Like, at this point, I don't know that you can argue that Kawhi Leonard is a better player than Jimmy Butler. And I think that's fair, given that Kawhi has been so injury-plagued and all these things, and what we really haven't seen from Kawhi with the Clippers. Like, Jimmy is just more reliable on the court, and part of it is being on the court and being reliable and being a leader. And I think Jimmy has that in spades. So, yeah, I think the answer is yes.
Yeah, I have to agree with that as well. I think we just see Jimmy continue to play his game at a high level, never loses control, always seems like he's focused on what he's doing. Look, that little skirmish on the sidelines notwithstanding, he's always focused on winning. He tries his best. He always going to impact the game, both on the offensive end, the defensive end, but also like still capable, even at this point, of taking a step back on occasion and letting the game flow and understanding what it requires of him. And I've made this comparison a lot, and I'll continue to make it. Second only to LeBron James, in my opinion, of being able to dictate the course of a game and saying, you know what, I need to be more of a playmaker today, or I need to be more aggressive on offense, because we've seen him capable of doing both. And I think still, even at 33, he'll be able to do that next season as well.
It's a good call. I would put Steph in that category also, but like those, I think it's a very, very good call. Look, you just look at the I've got some stats here, just sort of referencing what it is that he's able to do. Jimmy Butler, ISO scorer. When we're talking about a guy who could take over when he has to, we're talking about what? We're talking about isolation scoring. Jimmy Butler is in the 77th percentile as an ISO scorer. That's right with the best wing players in the NBA. You have some primo isolation guys like Luka and guys like that who are just 99th percentile, but Jimmy Butler is a awesome isolation scorer. And I don't think you really associate Jimmy Butler with that kind of game because, like you said, he can be so unselfish throughout the regular season. As a pick and roll ball handler, again, Jimmy Butler's not a naturally gifted ball handler. He's just not, right? He's not Kyrie Irving, and he's not even just naturally gifted at this. But as a pick and roll ball handler, man, like, he's up there with some of the best in the league. During the regular season, he averages 4.3 possessions per game as a pick and roll ball handler, and he scores at a 0.92 points per possession clip, which again is up there with some of the best in the league. You look at the playoffs for that, 6.2 possessions in the playoffs, almost 2 more possessions as a pick and roll ball handler in the playoffs. Like I said, he just turns it up a notch. And then the efficiency does not go down, David. In fact, it goes up to 1.09 points per possession, and that is at the upper crust of elite in the NBA. When he turns it up, he gets better. He's a good post-up player. I mean, he's averaging 2.5 post-ups a game at 1 point per possession. That's right there with a guy like Giannis, who we obviously associate with posting up and that kind of bully ball style of play, and obviously we do with Jimmy as well. So you just go down the line of these advanced stats here, and Jimmy just checks all these boxes of what you would expect from a wing player who carries his team. Jimmy Butler is just flatly one of those guys.
He's a great finisher. Also gets to the line a whole heck of a lot,
Yes.
which also certainly helps that. And I don't see any of those things deteriorating. Like he doesn't have the same touch around the basket, obviously, as a Dwayne Wade, but I think he's a little bit more controlled around the basket. Like Dwayne, I think he was trying to get. I don't want to call Dwayne a flop artist because I don't think that certainly was like he certainly took benefited from the free throw as great players always do. But I think he was looking for the call, especially at this point in his career, a lot more often than Jimmy does. Like Jimmy will get the call more often just because I think a little bit stronger, a little bit more physical, not shying away from contact to some degree. And I think he's looking to score first and foremost. Very rarely do we see Jimmy kind of put up a bad shot knowing or expecting a foul call in his favor. And I don't think either of those things will change next year. I think he's going to continue to dominate around the paint. I think he's going to continue to get those calls in his favor. I'm not sure what the secret is. Like there has to be something. He gets to the foul line a lot, and yet he does not have that reputation of a James Harden or anything like that. It seems like every time he gets to the free throw line, and this is from not just Heat fans, but also opponents, media in general. Like it seems like every trip to the line is extremely well earned for him, and nobody criticizes Jimmy.
He doesn't flop. He doesn't throw the head back. And also, when you
Does
compare it
not.
to guys like Harden and like Trae Young, that's
Yep.
such a part of their game. They're taking like 12 to 14 free throws a game.
Right.
It is a baiting. They're baiting the officials. I'm not saying Jimmy Butler isn't trying to get to the line. He's trying to get to the line. But when you compare him to those guys who are like all-time flop artists, yeah, obviously Jimmy Butler is going to stand out as not that. Most players do, right? And in terms of the D Wade comparisons, just completely different mindsets. D Wade was like Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, assassin scorer. That's not Jimmy's game. It's not. That's to me where the comparison ends. I like the comparison you made from an aging perspective. Obviously, Jimmy Butler's peak isn't anywhere close to what Dwayne Wade's peak was, but he's aging better than Dwayne Wade. And a lot of that, to your point, was because of Dwayne Wade's the knee surgery that he mistakenly got at Marquette. By the way, one of the biggest what ifs, I think, in NBA history. Who knows what Dwayne Wade's career looks like if he actually gotten the right surgery instead of the wrong one in college. But that's a different podcast. Jimmy Butler is going to be just fine, is I think our underlying point. All the metrics that we laid out, all the things that you're talking about as far as his aging and the minutes played and all this stuff. I like the point you made, by the way. I want to circle back to the Tom Thibodeau point. Like that was a narrative after Jimmy played under Tibbs for so long that he's got all this mileage. That narrative has gone away in large part because he started tapering off the minutes in the games played, and now he's back in line to where he ought to be in terms of a minutes played and in terms of sort of the aging cycle that he's at. This is a guy square in the middle of his prime. The metrics bear it out. He's going to be fine. The overall question, what we're asking here on his 33rd birthday, happy birthday, Jimmy Butler, is, are we expecting age to become a factor this season? I think the overwhelming answer for both of us right now is no, we don't expect it to. But I think there are ways that the Heat can try to maximize what is left of his prime.
That's right. Just because he can carry the team doesn't necessarily mean that he should be put in that position moving forward. So we'll answer that in the next segment here on Locked On Heat. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. As always, make sure to write to us, send us comments, leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. We always want to hear from you, especially with the season right around the corner, just 10 days away. 10 days away. Is that possible? 10 days away from the start of training camp? Look, I mean, I don't think we complain necessarily about the offseason. It's a little difficult sometimes to find useful information to talk about. We could always BS our way through an episode, but that's not our style, baby. Yes, that's not what we do. Not here, not on Locked On Heat. Sure. But 10 days away. There's a lot of questions, and we're going to be asking them over the next few days because we're excited about the start of training camp. Media day right around the corner, as you mentioned before. We're excited to talk to players. Who knows? Maybe we'll even have locker room access this year. It should be fun.
I hope so.
I keep putting it out there in the universe, hoping that somebody will answer and say, you're right, we're going to have locker room access. But, the question is, one of the things anyway that I saw in the locker room in 2019-20, Jimmy's first year, was Jimmy just limping all the time. And again, that was a byproduct, I think, of him carrying that version of the team before Tyler took a step up, before Bam, reached another level that he has yet to reach still. But even after that season, of course, the iconic image of him bent over the scorer's table and the finals. And there were questions even then, can he continue to carry the team? And now here we are 2 years later, after him putting up semi MVP, top 10-ish numbers in the NBA over the last couple seasons. And we're still questioning whether or not he can continue to carry the team. So I think the answer, again, as you put before, is that we both believe that he will,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean that he should, and that the Heat can do more to continue his peak, to continue the strength of this peak, and to make sure that he is in the best position to do what he wants most, which is to win an NBA title. So let's get into that question. What can
Yeah.
they do to maximize his peak a little bit more? And I keep coming back to this point, at least for what this next season is going to look like, is everybody else is going to have to find a way to step up. Jimmy's still going to be your go-to player, as he should, because he's your best player, and he will continue to be your best player in the foreseeable future. But that doesn't mean that you can't expect a rise in their game from Bam Adebayo, Tyler Herro, Kyle Lowry, everybody on this roster. If you're going to get playing time and you want to be able to maximize your opportunity, you want to be able to ride Jimmy's coattails for as long as you can and possibly even find a way into the NBA Finals, then that's your best bet, is to continue to show improvement in all other areas from all other players so that Jimmy can be put in the position to succeed when it matters most.
And that's where the Heat are at right now, right? And we know they were chasing another star to pair next to Jimmy Butler so that he wouldn't have to carry the load. We saw how it just wasn't enough at the end of the Eastern Conference Finals for all the things that we said, niceties that we gave to Jimmy Butler, and all the platitudes that we've spent most of this podcast discussing. He's not the guy that you can just have a bunch of injured players around and be able to get to the finals. Very few players are that way. We even saw with Milwaukee, with Giannis. He didn't have Chris Middleton. They lost to Boston. So
yeah, is there any? I mean, to that point, is there any one player?
LeBron at his prime was like the closest thing. You know what I mean? And that's maybe the best player of all time, top two, inarguably. So short of the Heat getting that other star player, which, by the way, I would be surprised if the Heat's roster right now looks the same at the end of the regular season. This is still a team that could make some moves. So there's part of that between now and the trade deadline. Do they make a move to go get a player of that caliber, or even a notch or two or three less than another superstar next to Jimmy? And then, like you said, can you get improvements from Tyler? That, to me, is a big part of this season. Can he just be that other guy who could be the top scorer next to Jimmy Butler in the starting lineup? I think the main mission for this season, even more than trying to get to the NBA Finals, is just answering that question. Is Tyler Herro that guy, or isn't he? And then you go beyond that, too. I do think that and we've talked about all that stuff a lot already. The one thing I don't think we have talked about a ton is just how Miami's style of play is going to change. And maybe it will help Jimmy Butler. We hear, like you said, we've got Media Day, training camp around the corner, and I guarantee you, one of the things we'll hear, not just from the Miami Heat, but from teams all around the NBA, is what? We want to play with pace and we want to play faster. Every team says it every single year, every media day. All 30 of them do, without question. The Miami Heat will say the same thing. Eric Spoelstra will say the same thing. If they can actually do it, though, then I really think that there's a chance that could benefit Jimmy Butler. You would say, hey, a guy at 33 years old, should he be playing faster? And I think for Jimmy, the answer is yes, because if you get him in the open floor a little bit more, then he's banging bodies less. He's getting easier baskets. You're able to just get the score up. I think defensively, Miami's still going to be top 10 in the league in defensive rating. I just don't think they'll be elite the way that they were last year without PJ Tucker and being as undersized as they are. But just for some stats for you, David, like Jimmy Butler was sneakily one of the best transition scorers in the NBA. I mean, his transition buckets came at about a 15% clip, and they were up there with some of the best play. Like his efficiency was up there with Giannis, John Morant, Tatum, Jaylen Brown, Kevin Durant, James Harden, like some of these guys who you associate a lot with that kind of game. And I don't think you necessarily do associate Jimmy Butler with transition game. The difference is that he does it at such a less frequency than those other guys. If they can go from like a 15% frequency of getting Jimmy involved in transition to somewhere like at 20%, then I think that could be a huge boost for Jimmy Butler in extending this prime and maximizing this prime. I want to talk about three-point shooting in a little bit too, but in terms of transition, when you have Caleb Martin basically slotting in as your starting power forward, you're going to be playing small a lot too as the game goes on with Jimmy at the 4. If you're going to play faster, more 4-out, 5-out offense, I think we're going to see a lot more of that this season. I actually do think that a faster pace of play, more threes, more transition opportunities, that's going to be how I think that's going to be how Miami is going to operate, because that's going to be how they're going to win games, because whatever slide they take defensively, and again, it'll probably be a small one, but it will be a real one. I think they have to make up for it offensively.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that suits them best, or at least it seems like it would on paper. But sometimes I question whether or not this is a roster comprised that could actually take that lead. Like Kyle at his age, Tyler, not really much of a transition player. Bam,
Tyler likes
you know,
those
by
transition threes, and Bam's a great transition player. I just don't think we've
by
seen a ton
virtue of
of it.
just being a big, yeah, it
Yeah,
just
who can run the
they
floor. I mean,
slow
he
it
can
down.
outrun any center in the league.
Yeah, but they rarely do. And I
Right.
just wonder, they're going to go into the whole idea again, like you said, they're going to talk about it, but then by October,
Yeah, no,
November, we'll start to see
yeah,
it less
David,
and
I'll
less.
believe it when I see it. It's like LeBron every year says, I want to take the ball out of my hands a little bit more, give it to these guys. And then what happens
Right,
a month into the season? LeBron has the ball in his hands every single possession.
right.
I hear you. I 100% agree with you. I just think that if you're not that big, and I don't know that this team is going to look, pace is sort of I think people confuse what pace really means. You could pass the
The
ball a
catch-all,
lot,
yeah,
but you
yeah,
can't, but that doesn't necessarily generate a fast pace. Pace is just how quickly you shoot the ball. Miami can play
right,
with pace by passing the ball a lot and moving the ball a lot. Them and Golden State are very similar in that way. Like Golden State isn't the fastest pace team, but we think that
right.
they are because the ball moves so much. It looks like a fast-paced game because it is a fast-paced game. It just doesn't qualify under the pace category as it's defined by the NBA's stats website. But so I don't want to get caught up too much in the individual stat itself, but I do think that Miami's going to have to try to get out and transition a little bit more, especially if they don't really know if Tyler's that other scorer. Like if you can get easier buckets in transition, that eases the burden on Jimmy and all that kind of stuff. Can we talk about the three-point shooting a little bit?
Well, I'm glad because that it seems like a natural segue there. Because
Yeah.
then to play that sort of style of play, and you brought up, Golden State, obviously a great comparison there. You're going to need Tyler in the starting lineup. He's going to have to put up more threes, but you probably have to put Max Strus in there instead of Caleb Martin because he's your 3-point shooter, right? He's at least him and Duncan are your best 3-point shooters. Wouldn't they be a better fit at the 4 ostensibly? Again, none of these players a power forward by any
Right.
stretch of the imagination. So in order to facilitate this faster pace offense where you're putting up more threes, somewhere closer to 40 to 45 threes per game,
That's the number.
you're going to have 3-point shooters
Yeah.
out there, right?
I do wonder if they're going to experiment with Duncan at power forward because you try to figure out a way that they can shoehorn him into the rotation. He's 6'7", he's big. I don't know. Maybe if you're guarding other 4s, if you're Duncan Robinson, it's not
Not
you're
as
not
foul
prone
prone.
to fouling. Exactly. But also those players are bigger, and maybe they'll just post him up, and then he'll foul that way instead of trying to keep up with wings, which is
We've
typically
seen Duncan. He's not a social media guy, right? But we see no off-season workouts from him.
No.
I'd love to see him on media day, like 15 pounds heavy.
Oh
like
boy,
jacked.
yeah. We're gonna get the the jacked Instagram photos and stuff like that.
Also
From Duncan.
watch, yeah.
No, I
Yeah.
think I don't know if the lineup thing is necessarily as important. I think they're going to experiment with Jimmy at the 4, whether or not they start games or not. They're not. I don't think they'll start games with Jimmy at the floor, but they're going to get to the lineups with Jimmy at the 4. And by the way, like last season's numbers, Jimmy Butler at small forward, every lineup with him at small forward, the Heat 114 offensive rating, a defensive rating of 108.2. This is obviously per 100 possessions, plus 5.8 net rating. Jimmy Butler at power forward. The offense takes off, 119.7 offensive rating. Elite offense. Defensively, obviously and expectedly slides, 112.1 defensive rating, but a net rating that's better, 7.6 net rating. Now, those possessions are less than 50% of the possessions of Jimmy Butler at small forward, but still, more than 1,000 possessions in a pretty solid sample. Obviously, you just allow a ton of offensive rebounds and free throws when you play small with Jimmy at the 4, but they are also better in transition, to my earlier point. But no, I think if you want to start taking that, I think you nailed the number, 40 to 45 threes a game. I think it's less about just putting another 3-point shooter in the lineup because I think you do want to have some defense there. And as much as Max Strus has impressed us defensively, Caleb Martin is a much better defender than Max Strus. And I think you want to maintain that part of your identity. If the lineup is what we expect it to be, Lowry, Tyler, Jimmy Butler, Caleb Martin, Bam Adebayo, I kind of look at Jimmy Butler as being the guy who can amp up the 3-point shooting. He's never going to be an awesome 3-point shooter, but we saw in the playoffs last year, David, I mean, that 3-point shooting was substantially better than it was in the regular season. We always just sort of joke about it, but you look over the course of his career, in the regular season, he's averaging this is in Miami, by the way, 2 3-point attempts per game in the regular season, making him at a 24% clip. Bad. Just Russell Westbrook numbers, except at a less attempts per game, much less.
Yeah.
In the playoffs, that number goes up to 3 attempts per game, 33.3% from 3-point range. Again, not elite, not close to elite, but respectable. And I think a good number at 3 a game. Last year in the playoffs, 4 a game, 34% from 3-point range. And by the way, you could say, well, small sample. It's not that small of a sample. his totals in the regular season from 3-point range, 337 threes taken in Miami during the regular season. In the postseason, he's taken 126 in the playoffs. He's always been a good free throw shooter, which is a key indicator to just shooting ability. Jimmy Butler, to me, is a good 3-point shooter, just waiting to be unleashed. Not elite, but good. I think he's a good 3-point shooter. And as we've seen, to your point about social media, Jimmy Butler's out there on social media taking a lot of threes. And yeah, it's easy to edit out the misses and the clunkers and the ones that just brick off the back of the rim. But I think we have seen Jimmy Butler with his work with Chris Brinkley lately really put an emphasis on the 3-point shot. He talked about it a lot in the playoffs last year. He said, I can take this shot. How many times have we heard his teammates say, we see him take this shot all the time in practice. We are urging him to take more of them. I think that's going to be a key part of Jimmy Butler's game, not just in the playoffs as it has been for whatever reason in Miami, but in the regular season too. I think they're going to need that from him.
I think he's tweaked his form. I really have. I think we saw last season some change at the dynamic. The first couple seasons in Miami, a little bit more of a hitch in that motion. And then in the third season, I think we saw him kind of be a lot more fluid in that sense. And certainly in the playoffs, by the time he got to the playoffs, it seemed like those shots were just in comfortable rhythm. And we're saying to ourselves, as we're looking at these games and analyzing Jimmy's performance, we're saying that is, at least in appearance, a comfortable shooter, somebody who feels like he's in the zone and the rhythm where he can take that shot and make it on occasion. 34%. I mean, that's pretty solid, and I think we're going to continue to see that evolution from him. And I like that,
and that'll get better. I agree with you.
Yeah, exactly. I think as long as he's taking that shot with that kind of frequency, you have to respect it, whether they fall down or not. Like even Dwayne was getting respect from the 3-point line, and he was never a competent 3-point shooter either. So
he has the most famous missed threes in NBA Finals history or conference Finals history, perhaps. Like teams are going to respect it, right? It almost went in. Yeah. I don't know. I agree with you. When you're a star player, you just typically get that respect from 3-point range, unless you're Russell Westbrook, basically, which has a track record of literally being the worst at it in NBA history. But look.
I think he's going to get a lot of players. I think he's going to get a lot of players to bite on the three too. Like that's going to be another opportunity for him to get to the free throw line.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. I could see Jimmy taking on Jay Crowder-esque numbers of and ones with a 4-point play. You know, like I could see him taking that game to that next level. Like if there's an opportunity for him to continue to maximize his peak, it's by expanding his range, drawing less contact, and not putting so much wear and tear on his body, and still being able to be effective in getting to the line.
If you get one guy to close out to you on that three, and then you pump fake it, blow by him, and then you still get to the free throw line, you're drawing contact. The difference between drawing contact between one body and drawing contact from two bodies is a whole body. It's a whole NBA body, David. It matters. Not to keep comparing Jimmy Butler to the all-time greats like Michael Jordan and Dwayne Wade and now LeBron James, but we have seen LeBron, as he has aged, do what? Take way more threes. He has gravitated to beyond the arc, and he's taking way more threes at almost like Steph Curry level rates. Not quality, you know what I mean? But like he's taking threes all the time, just dribbling up, taking threes from 35 feet whenever he wants. I don't know that Jimmy will ever get to that level. I think LeBron has gotten so much better from a three-point perspective than we've seen Jimmy even get close to. But if Jimmy Butler can start making his way towards the three-point line a little bit more, that's how you've seen guys who are smart about their bodies like LeBron and like Jimmy Butler is, extend their primes a little bit more. Take a little bit less punishment, especially during the regular season. Take a lot more threes. Get those reps in during the regular season. And then by the playoffs, that three-point shot is a real weapon for you, right? Like 3 years ago, we saw LeBron beat the Warriors in the play-in game with a three-pointer, right? Like it becomes a real legitimate weapon for you. And by the way, who knows? If Jimmy Butler was taking more than 2 3-point attempts per game during the regular season last year, maybe that three at the end of Game 7 does go in. You know, like practice matters. I think it's going to be a part of his game. I don't think that it's just a postseason thing. I think what we saw and what we heard from him and people around him in the playoffs last year indicated to me, at least, it was a hint that this is going to be a trend going forward and not just a every playoffs, we're just going to start ramping up the 3-point attempts. I think it's more of a trend line that'll carry through the regular season as well.
Quick last question before we wrap up today's episode. With The Athletic putting out a list of players that are a lock for the basketball, I should say, Hall of Fame. That's a distinction a lot of people don't recognize. It's not the NBA Hall of Fame. It's the James Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame, taking into consideration your collegiate international career, USA basketball, etc. Of course, Jimmy Butler, a gold medal winner with Team USA. is Jimmy Butler a Hall of Fame player at this point in his career?
He is. And also Kyle Lowry. I think there's two like secure basketball Hall of Famers on this roster already. Oh, and Haslam, obviously Udonis Haslam too. I think he'll be in it.
You think he'll be in the Basketball Hall of Fame?
Does he have a gold medal? I can't remember.
No.
No, he doesn't. Maybe
Udonis
not. Maybe
Haslem?
not Haslam. Maybe not Haslam. You're right.
No,
He played so long. He's just
that doesn't mean anything.
Yeah, I guess you're right. It doesn't really mean anything. No, I think Jimmy. You're right. Jimmy, Kyle Lowry, those to me, those guys. Kyle has a gold medalist. What he means to the country of Canada and making basketball a thing in Toronto, like that to me is very meaningful and the sort of thing that gets included in consideration. So yeah, and that's to say nothing about obviously young players. Who knows what Bam's career looks like, Tyler's career looks like. But right now, I think it's Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry. I think those guys are Hall of Famers.
I agree with you. And congratulations to Tim Hardaway also.
Yes.
as
And
we
Dwayne
wrap up
Wade
today's
next year, baby. It's going to be huge. That's a great
Why?
class.
Oh,
He's on
yeah.
the
I'm
list.
sorry. Yeah. No. I'm sure he's a lock in his first year. I'm sure he seems one of those players that's probably going to be a first ballot player.
No doubt.
Surprised that Dwayne no longer going to be on the TNT crew because he was fantastic as part of that. Yeah.
Yeah, they got a rebuild underway in Utah. They need his basketball mind, I guess. They're busy. All right, before we sign off here, can I just say a couple words about my friend Jonathan Tjarks?
Absolutely.
Obviously, if you don't know, Jonathan Tjarks, who was a writer for The Ringer, passed away from cancer at 34 years old this past weekend. I got to know him pretty well over the last couple of years. He was a phenomenally talented writer. I thought he was one of the smartest basketball minds in NBA media. He was one of the first people who made me feel included in NBA media because he's shared this story on, I can't remember which podcast. I'm pretty sure it was one of the Ringer podcasts recently, but he started like I did, just sort of the non-traditional route, right? He didn't get a job at doing high school preps at a newspaper and then work your way up to a major beat and then eventually get to a national space like the Ringer. But he just had a blog and he was just trying to figure it out, like so many of us are. And like I did, he also kind of made ends meet by working for a wine and spirits distributor. And he shared that story on a podcast recently, and I reached out to him, and we talked a little bit about that and just how one of the things he said was, it's one of the reasons, like, it's one of the few things that set him apart is having that real world actual job experience versus a lot of people in NBA media who just sort of come up in this and it's just what they know. Having worked a real job, because I don't qualify this as a very real job, this is more of a hobby that pays, you get more appreciation for it. And I think that came out so much in Jonathan's writing, was just how much he loved this and how much he really appreciated the opportunity to just write about it and talk about this sport that he absolutely loved. And that's how, by all accounts, how he lived his life. That's how I knew him. He was always laughing. I remember just in Summer League a couple years ago having the best time watching Summer League games and just laughing the entire game. He just absolutely loved what he did. He loved his life. He loved his wife, loved his son. And he was a really great guy who impacted a lot of people around him. And I think it's just a thing that when something like this happens, you're just reminded to just not take for granted anything that you love in life, whether it's your job, whether it's basketball, whether it's your family, your friends. It's all, if you love it, don't take it for granted. And I think that more than anything is what Tjarks reminds me of and what I'll think about and he'll be in my thoughts for a very long time.
Well said. And of course, I think there is a GoFundMe to donate for his family. Again, his wife, Melissa, his young son. As a father myself, I can't imagine a life where I mean, just not being there for my son or my wife, and for them to have to move on and find a way. And I know sometimes when it comes to these terminal illnesses, there's, it's a long expectation. Not that he ever gave up at any point, but I think he's said on many occasions that there's no chance of this getting better, and he knew well ahead that this was going to be terminal at some point. And so you can always prepare for it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it gets any easier. And that's the son who grows up not knowing his father. And I know he wrote about it beautifully for The Ringer at one point. So go and check that out if you haven't seen it on social media. But a fantastic person, fantastic writer, and leaves behind a family that's grieving. So if you can donate and you have the time, please feel free to do so. But
the GoFundMe, the link to the GoFundMe site is on my Twitter. It's on a lot of Twitters. Just if you need a link, it's on Twitter. If you consumed his work, even if you didn't know him, just consider giving a small donation.
Yeah, nothing too small in this case, but that'll wrap it up for today's episode. Thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your second listen, get up to date on the latest news and rumors in the NBA in just 30 minutes every day with Locked On NBA. This is David Ramil signing off for now. Thanks so much for joining me, Wes.
Wrap it up, B.